Hi everyone, I'm Kyle Dyer and welcome to Colorado Inside Out on this Friday, the 20th of September. Let me introduce you to this week's Insider panel. We have Patty Calhoun, founder and editor of Westward; Eric Sonderman, columnist with Colorado Politics and the Denver and Colorado Springs Gazettes; Carlos Martinez, president and CEO of the Latino Community Foundation of Colorado; and Carly West, VP Government Affairs with the Denver Metro Chamber of Commerce. As the Independent National Convention closes in Denver, Aurora has received word to expect a visit from former President Donald Trump in the next couple of weeks. So he announced at a rally on Wednesday night. And let us remind you that 3 weeks from today is when our Colorado ballots head out into the mail. Patty.
Well, you just can't make this up. I was listening to the news the other night, and Trump at a rally in New York says, I'm going to go to Springfield, Ohio, and then I'm going to go to Aurora. And just on a fact-finding mission, I feel bad for the people in Aurora. I mean, I talked about this last week. They have these great arts events going on. They just had this big story in Food and Wine about how it is the most diverse, best dining scene in Colorado. And no one is paying any attention to that. They are just paying attention to the Venezuelan gang rumors. But the people in Aurora I've talked to feel worse about Springfield. I was just over at the Stanley Marketplace, where ironically RFK had been in May, who didn't make it to the independent convention. But they're saying, we feel so bad for Springfield. We're not getting death threats, and don't take that as a hint. We don't want Aurora to get death threats. Like Springfield, what's happening there? Springfield even had to cancel its annual Culture Fest because the town is the victim of such unfounded rumors. So everyone needs to calm down, and that includes Donald Trump.
Eric.
And Patty's right. This is going to be a spectacle when Donald Trump comes to Aurora. He announced his intentions in one very blue state, in Long Island in New York. He's now coming to another very blue state. There's no electoral votes up for grabs for him in either of those states, but obviously he's just trying to put a spotlight on the immigration issue, as other issues are not working out quite as well as he wants. He's trying to use this to really drive his campaign, and the good people of Aurora, just like the good people of Springfield, are in many cases the victims. Immigration is a completely legitimate issue. It needs to be discussed, it needs to be fixed, but it does not need to be discussed or fixed with hyperbole, sensationalism, and quite frankly, bad facts, which is what Donald Trump has been doing. It's his modus operandi. As you point out, ballots going out in 3 weeks. The whole election is 7 weeks, something like that, away. Polls remain very close. I'd probably slightly rather be Kamala Harris than Donald Trump at the moment, but only slightly. And we've seen this play before with him trailing in the polls, but ultimately winning.
I hope he doesn't come. But, if he comes, he's using it as to go ahead and do a distraction on his campaign, to go ahead and instill more fear in our citizens, and really to go ahead and figure out how he uses it towards his campaign, to go ahead and continue to use it as a wedge issue. So I hope that the residents and our elected officials in Aurora really come out with a strong communication strategy before he comes out and while he's here. Because I think you look at Aurora, one of the largest communities with such a diverse, immigrant population. And they're the ones who are really making Aurora, happen right now. You heard Patty about the exciting, restaurants and the food scene that's happening there. Well, a lot of it's because of these immigrants. Immigrants make huge contributions, and I wish that, Aurora would really come out strong about how immigrants are contributing to the economy of the city.
We're not hearing much of a communication strategy, are we?
No.
Carly.
I'll say one of the things I'm really looking at with all of this is that interplay between our presidential politics and our presidential election, and what that looks like on the ground in terms of some of our local races. I think in our primaries we saw some moderation in terms of our candidates who advanced really focused on pocketbook issues, but the open question is Colorado still going to be a state known for splitting the ballot? And the question is, to what degree is the presidential election going to really upend that narrative, and whether we see that still continue to happen, or if we see in the next upcoming election cycle, if we see another big blue wave in Colorado. for all those local down ballot races.
And let's hope, as a side note, that the leaders in Aurora, starting with Mayor Kaufman, are a little more forthright and encountering some of the false narratives, a la Governor DeWine in Ohio, a la the Republican mayor of Springfield, Ohio. Mike Kaufman's been awfully silent here and playing the Trump game here. It doesn't become him.
Okay. The city of Denver reports that it has served more than 42,000 immigrants to date. And because the numbers have dropped regarding people coming here from the southern border, the city's asylum program is about to change. Even so, Castle Rock is considering suing Denver over its migrant policies, arguing that Denver has been too welcoming to too many migrants to the entire metro area. And other suburban cities are also considering the same kind of action. Eric, let's start with you on this.
Well, quite frankly, Kyle, the whole situation gives me more confusion than it does clarity at the moment. Obviously, the numbers have dropped. I would love Mayor Johnston to be a little more transparent about, yes, the programs are changing, but specifically how they're changing, what monies are not being spent going forward, what monies will continue to be spent. As to the lawsuit, I understand, or it's a possible lawsuit. It's not a lawsuit yet. They're considering it. I understand the theory. I'm not convinced that it has a lot of legs yet, but again, I think this is one of our first panels without a lawyer at the table, which high five for that.
Carlos, your thoughts?
Well, when I saw that lawsuit, I think the first thing that went to my brain was, and this has been a conversation here before, is like, should we be suing them for the people that Denver Health provides health to them also then? So it's just really interesting how right away it's like, well, let's go sue, without really thinking through. And, and we've had waves of immigrants going back hundreds of years, the Italian, the Irish, Chinese, Mexican. And whenever we have new waves of immigrants, there's some growing pain that goes along with it. And, we're going to have some of that growing pain. But at the end of the day, they become productive citizens. And I think in a state where we have a large aging population, where we're losing that production, we need to be able to go ahead and replace that production so that we can have a very healthy, economically stable state. And I think there will be great contributors to our society in just figuring out how it is that we bring them in. And I think that's the confusion right now about how do we do it quickly, because everybody wants to see results really quick around this. Mm-hmm. This is going to take a little bit of time, and we have to do it more of a comprehensive also approach instead of a Band-Aid approach around this.
And to give some context, I think earlier this week, 12 people arrived on Wednesday, 13 on Tuesday, or something to that effect. That's how few people are coming. And because of that, Denver is going to close down two of its migrant shelters and get it ready for cold weather shelters for the homeless. Carly.
To Eric's point, there are open questions about what that budget looks like moving forward, but I'll also say the Denver Metro Chamber has been very engaged with the city as they've looked to put together their Work Ready program and making sure that that's a program that businesses can participate in, hire people through, making sure they're not running afoul of federal law. So what we're seeing there is they've got 300 people already enrolled in the basic training program there and are starting to launch into those more specialized industries in the next month. And those are industries we know companies really need people in. It's healthcare and hospitality and construction and early childhood education. And we hear from our businesses all the time they need every employee they can find when it comes to filling those critical roles for the state. We really need to have a collaborative approach because those don't really line up against city and county lines. And I think this is another area where a regional approach is really what we need because it is a regional and state issue.
Absolutely.
We have to remember that Aurora, 1 out of 5 people in Aurora was born out of this country, the residents. There was a huge and very welcoming migrant population there long before the whole migrant issue with the Venezuelans coming up in 2022, the crisis in Denver. And Aurora, which bills itself as the world in a city, is a really fascinating place. And I think they will get this settled. Moving to Denver, it's fascinating how for so long, all we were talking about was the homeless resolution and then the migrant problem. And you're not hearing a lot about the rest of the city yet. I think the city just doesn't really have its mojo back. I think we've got a good plan now for migrants moving forward. I think there are 845 people who've signed up for that program so far. There may not be that asylum program again next year. This could be it. The city will keep working on the best way to deal with the dwindling migrant numbers. But we have a whole city that we want to hear about. We want to know what's going on downtown. We want to deal with what's going on our streets. So it's time to look at different things in Denver.
Okay, all right. Every week, right up until Election Day, we are going to take on a different ballot measure to discuss and hopefully inform you. Let's start right with Initiative 310, which is very much talked about. If passed, it would overhaul the way we currently run elections here in Colorado. Carlos, let's start with you.
So this would allow all candidates primary elections and also ranked choice voting. And I think as I look at this, reminds me of our Constitution. We the people, not we the political parties. And I think that as we look at this, is this something that allows us to be able to have more choice in how elections are? Because I think this election with Harris-Walz ticket has really engaged a lot of Gen Zs and a lot of millennials to really step up their political activity and engagement. Could this be a way to be able to bring them in? As the baby boomers did in the 60s and 70s and have been really controlling the elections for the last couple of decades. Is this kind of like a time in our life where we're looking at the transfer of that electorate to be able to move and shift in different ways? So I'm excited to be able to see if this could be something that could work here in Colorado and give more people choice and more engagement in our political system.
And excite younger voters to come out and participate on that measure.
Yes.
Carly.
So I love the intent behind this, opening up the primary to more voters and seeing potentially more reflection of our real, very independent, pretty moderate electorate in our elected offices. But at the same time, there's just not a lot of data right now around whether this model of open primaries and ranked choice voting achieves that result. I'm a little bit of the mindset of Colorado is already heads and tails above so many other states when it comes to our elections, how they're run, letting independent voters participate in the primary of their choice. Part of me just wonders, Colorado's the guinea pig on a lot of big ideas. What if on this one, considering how great we're doing right now, is this one where we should see how it plays out somewhere else before we make a change to an already great system?
Okay.
Well, our system is great for allowing people to vote. You've got the mail-in ballots. It's easy to register. But when you look at the primaries, for example, to go off what Carlos was saying, you have the Republican Party. Are you kidding me? Like, with all the problems they are having, and then they're even trying to mandate who you can vote for within their own party in the primary, trying to keep people out, doing deals with the libertarians. I think it's the primary position right now that really is something that needs to be changed. 48% of the voters are unaffiliated. It's good that we already had the change that allows them to vote in one or the other. But why are the two major political parties the ones who get to make the choices on the candidates that we'll ultimately see in November? So I think this is really an important change. That first part of it, the ranked choice voting in the end, is a little more problematic. I have no doubt that Colorado's election judges and clerks would be up to the challenge because they've been up to every other challenge if we ever go to that forum. But ranked choice, I'm still not so sure on, but I love the idea of opening up the primaries.
Okay.
Happy to bat cleanup here. I guess I approach this from the premise that almost any reasonable step to bring politics even only slightly more in a centrist direction and away from the craziness on both poles is a step worth taking. I think that is the intent behind this, and I think over the long haul it will have that effect. The people who are bringing you this initiative are basically the same people who brought you some previous reform initiatives to allow independent voters, unaffiliated voters, to make it easier for them to vote in primaries, and then a few years after that, to change the redistricting process, to make that less political and more fair. I think this is the next step in that drive toward sensible governmental reform. This is being opposed harshly by vested interests in both political parties, and I think that says something. Our elections do not belong to the parties, they belong to the people. I love Carlos's line, quoting back to the Constitution. And I don't know if this is, to Carly's point, I don't know if this is a perfect system. But I also know that our current system, just based on results, is far from a perfect system. And I'm willing to take a try at this thing. I think it will ultimately lead to more moderate centrist politics, and I think that's to be celebrated.
Isn't it true, though, even if this were to pass, it wouldn't take an effect for a while because the legislature tacked on a clause that said, okay, before we do this statewide, certain areas throughout the state would have to try it out? Isn't that what it is? So it could be a while if it ever happens, right?
Yeah, it would be a while. But, I don't mind being the state that tries this out and takes it forward. We've done that in other areas. So, yeah. And I think if we could look at it, how do we do it over a period of time so that we get it right? There's no need to rush it. But if we just take our time, get it right, do the education that Carly was talking about, making sure that people understand what they're engaging in, I think this could be a home run.
Okay. There are two letters that have been said quite often this week in Colorado, and those are AI. Artificial intelligence was discussed at the first ever Denver AI Summit on Thursday. It was also discussed in special sessions during Denver Startup Week, which was this week. And Carly, the Denver Metro Chamber kicked off the week with another discussion with the governor. We're talking about AI because during the legislature, we passed some regulations, the first state in the country to do so regarding artificial intelligence.
We did, and we were fortunate to be joined by the AG and the authors of Colorado's AI legislation as well. So we had a great discussion really focused on how small businesses are impacted by and using AI. And one thing we're seeing is that small businesses, they've got a lot of challenges in front of them in terms of scaling up and hiring the people that they need. And what I'm seeing is that a lot of them are utilizing AI to accomplish some of those tasks in their businesses. So as we look at it through that lens and we look at Colorado's regulation, it's really important that we think about how we make sure that the protections are there, absolutely, but that we're not taking a tool away that can provide a lot of benefit and a lot of opportunity, especially for our small businesses going forward. I think there's a lot of goodwill towards finding that balance, but striking that balance between regulation and innovation is really a critical place that we're at right now. At the AI Summit, I heard somebody in one of the opening remarks talk about how we need to have a dialogue of learning rather than a big accountability stick. And that's a takeaway that really stuck with me.
Okay. All right, Patty, your thoughts on this?
Let's talk about some of our very smallest businesses, the independent creatives. And that's one of the big concerns when you're trying to figure out how to put up the guardrails on AI. How do you protect the artists with their creative process? You may recall the big hullabaloo at the state fair 2 years ago when the winning piece of art was actually created by AI. So you have to figure out how to protect them. At the same time, you make small businesses able to be more nimble, save money, and use AI in a good, ethical way. So there are a lot of unknowns that we're all beginning to know now, and some of it's great, some of it's frightening, and we just have to keep aware.
It kind of feels like when the World Wide Web came up, everyone was like, ooh, what's this going to be? Is it going to be a tool? Is it going to be a hindrance? Yeah, way back.
Well, as Carly said, AI is a tool. I have to cop, as I was doing a few minutes of prep this morning, to talk about AI, I figured where better to turn than ChatGPT, and it was my first time on ChatGPT. So I just typed in, give me 30 seconds of commentary on Colorado becoming an AI hub. And in a nanosecond, I got, quote, Colorado is rapidly emerging as a key player in the AI landscape thanks to its strong tech ecosystem, top-tier universities, and a growing startup culture. Cities like Denver and Boulder are attracting talent and investment, supported by a collaborative community focused on innovation. And it goes on. I won't read the whole thing in the interest of time. So there you go. There's my AI.
Okay, all right, Carlos.
Well, I'm excited about AI. Because of the potential that it holds to really transform our lives, make them better, how it transforms the economy as well, and how it can increase production for small businesses, larger businesses, but also nonprofits. So I don't want to forget our nonprofits out of this space either. And so I think the way, we're doing a lot of work within our organization right now of how we incorporate AI, how we put the guardrails within that to use that. And as Carly and both Eric said, it's a tool. it doesn't define your business. It doesn't define who you are. It's a tool to advance that. And I think if we use the tool in a way that allows us to increase production, to be better efficient, to bring more customer satisfaction to our work, then it's a tool that's being used to help us within our work. And it's going to be something that's going to be global. Yeah. So we cannot just sit back. As you talked about the World Wide Web when it was introduced, how many people were like, well, I'm not going to quite go onto that. When cell phones came out and what they do, well, I'll wait. But, this is where it's going. This is the direction where it's going. So let's figure out how we can adapt it. And I think, Carly, you said, become competent learners around this and use it very effectively.
You hear, though, and I'm curious, Carly, since you oversee the chamber and the business within our community, you hear, oh, it's going to take away jobs. And like you were saying, it's a tool. It doesn't define your business. People really are at the heart of any business, right?
Absolutely. And to the point of it being a tool, there are ways that businesses will change, and certainly jobs will adapt and education will adapt to a new reality when it comes to AI. But there are so many opportunities as well.
And let me throw out one of those guardrails. Every line in this came from a reporter who probably did some work that was then eaten up by AI. So it's the concern about plagiarism, it's the concern about work product. It's a great tool, but it just has to be used right.
Okay.
Well said.
All right. Let's talk about some of the highs and the lows from this week. We will start with Patty, and you can start on a low point.
It is really hard to beat Casa Bonita, which finally is telling everyone they're opening up on Mexican Independence Day. They're going to allow everyone to make reservations. And within the first 2 hours, they were gone through the middle of December.
Yep.
And people were very depressed. And if I'd had AI on my phone, I guess I would have tried to use that to wait in line with 100,000 other people.
My 21-year-old who's in college, who should have been studying, she got us tickets.
She probably used technology.
She's the one to go to for tickets.
I guess my word about Casa Bonita is the same word I would use about where I'm going here, and that word is overrated. And my disgrace, or say something unnice, would be for the Broncos head coach, Sean Payton. And this is not just a matter of his one-loss record, although that is not terribly admirable here in Denver, but it's really a question of the man and his character and integrity. He's making $18 million a year. This is somebody who was suspended when he was the head coach in New Orleans for a full season, the first time that had happened in about 40 or 50 years, for a bounty scandal where they were putting bounties on the heads of opposition players. He is not, as they say, a good dude. He is not the person to be leading this team, and the results are also less than happy.
Mm-hmm.
I think Milo is finding out on Monday of the newest wildfires that we have up in Larimer County. We've now burnt over 125,000 acres. And well, it hasn't hit any homes yet, but it destroys our beautiful state, our beautiful landscape, but also puts a lot of lives in danger. And just to see these wildfires just continue, it's kind of a little low for me.
Mm-hmm. Carly.
So to go back to the beginning, I'm from Aurora. I love Aurora, and for me, the low was seeing some of the narrative around my home city this week. We've seen in July 500 new state-of-the-art manufacturing jobs announced in Aurora. There are significant expansions at Fitzsimmons Innovation Community and Anschutz. We're also seeing major transit-oriented development in the city center. So there are just great things happening in Aurora. It is a hub for private equity. It's a hub for innovation, and there's a lot of great things happening there.
Good. Thank you for sharing. Something great.
Also in Aurora, as well as several other counties and municipalities, the Highline Canal started out as an irrigation bonanza, went high and dry, but now is a 71-mile recreational amenity. The Highline Conservancy, which is doing so much to keep it going, is having a big event tonight, and it's a great, great thing for the Metro Denver.
Good. Thank you.
Also in Aurora, and relating to what we've talked about on much of the show, the issue of immigrants. My wife and I were privileged last weekend to attend the annual event for Project Worthmore, which is a wonderful nonprofit based in Aurora that provides services of all kinds and helps immigrants and refugees navigate their way, their often difficult path in this new country. The stories we heard were both amazing and inspiring. It's a organization that is 12 years old, started serving one family, now serves north of 4,000 families, and hats off to Project Worthmore.
That is great. Okay.
5 days ago, we kicked off Hispanic Heritage Month.
Yes.
We have over 1.2 million Latinos living here in the state of Colorado, and over this month, there'll be hundreds of events throughout the state. So I just encourage people to go out to learn a little bit more about the Latino community here in Colorado. And this Saturday in Commerce City at the Downtown Derby, there'll be a big festival hosted by the city of Commerce City, along with Adelante Community Development and Cultivando, expecting thousands of people there at that event.
Fun. Yes.
On Wednesday, I was out walking around downtown, headed to an event, and between Startup Week and Den AI and the Rockies game, downtown was absolutely bustling and patios were full, and it felt like Denver is back. So that was a real high for me.
That is wonderful. All right, my high is a celebration of life of my former 9 News colleague, Ward Lucas, who passed away last weekend. Ward was an outstanding journalist here in Denver for more than 30 years. Ward was very curious about so much and very eager and dedicated to uncovering stories. When his boss in the 70s refused to buy a plane ticket for Ward and his videographer to get to Aspen when the infamous Ted Bundy escaped from the Pitkin County Jail, Ward went ahead and bought his own ticket to cover the story and took his photographer with him. I remember Ward telling me that he had a notebook where he would write down various story ideas that came to his mind, so that if one story panned out before the editorial meeting, he would have a whole bunch to fall back on and to pitch. He was very into his story ideas. Curiosity and sharing our curiosity with others is our role as journalists and storytellers and as people. So I thank Ward for that lasting impression he made on me. Thank you, panel, for the impressions and insight you brought to the table this week. We appreciate it. Thank you for watching along with us or listening on our podcast. And I'm Kyle Dyer. Enjoy this start to National Hispanic Heritage Week and get out and do some of the fun things that are right out your front door. I will see you next week here on PBS 12.
PBS 12 believes in the power of original, local programming. Help us bring more shows, like the one you just watched, by donating at pbs12.org/program support today.